Hey everybody! You know Jay, who owns Ocean View's real estate in Leland? Well, you might say I am his assistant, Annie. Today we're doing something a little different, but very cool. The origin story of one of Wilmington's most famous neighborhoods, Landfall. I get asked about it all the time. Great golf, gorgeous homes, gates, the whole nine. But there's a wild backstory here that most folks don't know. So let's walk it like I talk it, boots on the ground style, and connect the dots from Gilded Age Hunting Lodge to best address. If you've ever heard the phrase keeping up with the Joneses, yeah, this place may be part of that legend. Let's go. How it started: Pembrooke Jones's private playground. So rewind to the early 1900s. Landfall wasn't landfall. It was a 2,200-acre private hunting preserve called Pembrooke Jones Park, or Pembroke Park. Pembroke Jones was a Wilmington native, a rice broker and railroad investor who did very, very well. Millionaire-level Gilded Age wealth. He and his circle, think heavy hitters like Henry Walters, used this land as their retreat. In 1909, Jones builds a massive lodge and an over-the-top bungalow designed by J. Stewart Barney. This wasn't your average beach shack. We're talking early tech flex, a primitive air conditioning system, recessed lighting, secret doors, tabby pools stocked with trout. The whole place was a flex before Instagram existed. And then there's this romantic little piece of it, the Temple of Love, a stone gazebo designed by John Russell Pope. Yep, the architect who later did the Jefferson Memorial in D.C. Pope married Jones's daughter, so the family ties ran deep. That gazebo is still around today, fully restored, and it's one of those, if you know, landfall landmarks. Important to note, there was a whole community of African American employees and caretakers who made this estate run. Folks like Julius and George Evans, and Minnie Evans, yes, the Minnie Evans, lived and worked on the grounds, and started creating the artwork that later became internationally known. So, art and culture are baked into the DNA of this property. After Jones died in 1919, his widow Sarah married Henry Walters in 1922. They kept using nearby properties like Airlie Gardens, but the original lodge at Pembroke Park fell into disrepair. It sat abandoned for decades and finally burned down in 1955. The old ice house also deteriorated, but its footprint ended up influencing later development layouts. So even the bones of the old estate shaped what came next. From hunting preserve to high-end neighborhood fast forward to the 1970s. The land ends up with Jane Pope, Pembroke Jones's granddaughter and John Russell Pope's daughter. Her husband, Anthony Akers, was a New York lawyer, real estate developer, and former U.S. ambassador to New Zealand. He forms Landfall Development Co. to turn this giant rural preserve into a residential community. The name Landfall wasn't random. It's a nod to the idea that Italian explorer Giovanni da Verrazzano made landfall along this stretch of coast in 1524. That's why the logo has the ship. Nice touch. Akers dies unexpectedly in 1976. The project pauses. And then in the early 80s, it gets revived by Landfall Associates, Weyerhaeuser Co., developer J.P. Goforth, and Durham businessman, philanthropist Frank H. Keenan. Big Wilmington family ties. New Hanover County gives the green light in 1984. Dirt starts moving in 1986. And by May 1989, you've got the first clubhouse open. Then they stack the amenities. 2 golf courses, Pete Dye and Jack Nicklaus, Sports Center, and the Keenan Chapel, which is non-denominational and a sweet community gathering point. In '89, Goforth sells his share to Frank Keenan, and Keenan keeps pushing the vision. By 1992, you could buy a lot for around $60,000, and homes were going from $225,000 to $1.2 million. That absolutely juiced the local market, pulled in a lot of buyers from the Northeast, and put Wilmington on a new trajectory. The 90s. Growth, golf, and a big lake born out of mitigation. Mid-90s, Landfall looks at adding a 3rd golf course. They consult with top designers. Tom Watson gets mentioned, but instead of a whole new 18, they expand the Nicholas course by 9. That required wetland modifications and a serious mitigation plan, which leads to Landfall Lake in 1996, also called the Landfall Mitigation Lake. Here's why that matters. At the time, it was the largest mitigation project in North Carolina. It wasn't just digging a pretty pond. It involved restoring wetlands, donating to conservation groups, and building a serious stormwater management system. Then Bertha and Fran slam the coast in 96, the lake gets damaged, and they fix it by year's end. That tells you a lot about how Landfall operates. Big plans, big projects, and they follow through. On the wildlife side, deer overpopulation had become a real issue. Car collisions, landscaping getting hammered. So in 1995, they expanded controlled bow and arrow hunts to manage it. Smart, if not glamorous. And this is where the community heart shows up. The Landfall Foundation launches in September 1995. Frank Keenan puts up $50,000, residents match it, and that foundation has since given nearly $3.9 million to local charities. That's a lot of good coming out of one neighborhood. Modern Landfall, the snapshot. Today, Landfall is Wilmington's oldest gated community and one of its most recognized addresses. Quick stats for my data people. About 2,200 acres total, roughly 2,000 home sites across 24 sub-communities, around 1,570 homes built, 4 miles of waterfront along the intracoastal, 320 acres of conservation land, 29 miles of private roads, views of Wrightsville Beach, minutes to the sand, private equity club with 45 holes of championship golf, 2 clubhouses, parks, trails, and a very active year-round resident base. Forbes named it the best address back in 2001, which is a fun feather in the cap. Today you'll see homes from roughly the high 300s on the low end up to the multi-million range, 4.9 million and beyond for prime, renovated, or waterfront positions. That mitigation lake we talked about? Still taken care of with oversight from the Army Corps of Engineers and the Landfall Council of Associations. The COA took the reins back in 2000, and they continue to maintain what's essentially an environmental asset with neighborhood benefits. That's why you'll see Landfall feel like a nature preserve in parts, big trees, water, wildlife, right next to golf and gorgeous homes. Why this history matters if you're buying here. Identity. Landfall isn't a cookie-cutter golf community someone stamped onto a cow pasture. It's layered. Old Wilmington money, Gilded Age glam, architecture with pedigree, and a long arc of planning. Staying power. It's built to be a year-round community, not a resort that goes quiet. That matters for your lifestyle and for long-term value. Stewardship. The mitigation lake, conservation land, and controlled wildlife management. These are signs of a neighborhood that plans 10, 20, 30 years out. Community. The Landfall Foundation's impact is real. It's a place where residents invest in the region, not just in their own backyard. And just for the history lovers, when you're in Landfall, you're literally on ground that entertained Gilded Age elites, inspired Minnie Evans's art, and might even be part of the origin story behind Keeping Up with the Joneses. That's a pretty fun dinner party fact. So that's Landfall, how it went from Pembrooke Jones's private preserve to one of the most established, amenity-rich, and well-run communities in the Southeast. If you want the deep dive on specific sub-neighborhoods, golf adjacency, flood maps, or you're trying to figure out where the value pockets are inside the gates, hit me up. I do this every day, and I'm happy to be your boots-on-the-ground guide. This is Jay with Ocean Views Real Estate. If you found this helpful, drop a comment with your favorite Landfall detail, the Temple of Love, the Mitigation Lake, Minnie Evans, whatever grabbed you, and I'll see you on the next one.